the sacrifice, the difficulties, the challenges that you have to overcome on a daily basis. I went to like shake Messi's hand and he didn't look at me at all and like just walked past. He shared with me some words in Italian, then said to me in English, "You know how lucky you are, not everyone gets to touch God."
This was not meant to happen. This could not happen. This is happening.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another very special episode of The Coach's Son Parks the Bus. We are delighted today to have international TV presenter, host and journalist. You would have seen him on the likes on ESPN, beIN Sports, for those in Australia, Optus Sport, Stan Sport, just to name a few. Adriano Del Monte, welcome to The Coach's Son Parks the Bus.
Thanks for having me, guys. Absolute pleasure.
Mate, pleasure's all ours. So always we like to start off with obviously just finding a bit of a background in yourself, where you grew up, how your life brought you into football, and obviously the TV world for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally born in Melbourne, family is all from Italy, so there was the immediate connection. I currently live in Milan. I've been here now just ticked over 5 years into my 6th season covering the game here. But yeah, Melbourne born and raised, actually always played Aussie rules very seriously in Australia. So Aussie rules was never the love, but it was what I was good at playing and always loved the round ball. So I always just wanted to pursue a career in this space. I always had a fascination with television and immersing myself in the football culture, being on the pitch and doing that. And yeah, somehow I've turned that into a reality after many years of hard work and still working very hard. But yeah, at the moment, being based in Milan 5 years, spent the 5 years or so before that across the US and living in Qatar as well. And yeah, it's been a long but very rewarding journey, and back and forth to Australia every now and then when I can, but certainly loving life and living it up here in Italy.
Amazing. Absolutely. I wouldn't be complaining too much. I mean, plus, especially the travel time, go all the way back to Australia, then came all the way back to Italy. Was it 22 hours or something on the plane?
Exactly. Always a day long. But here in Italy, they can't believe when I say how far Australia is. I always find it quite funny how, for people certainly in Europe, Australia is just a fantasy. It's like this place on the other side of the world that, you'd never travel 24 hours to get anywhere. For them, going from Italy to Spain, an hour on a plane is long enough. So it's always quite fascinating because in Australia, we're just used to being able to, having to travel so far to get anywhere. So yeah, for me, I always make the effort. Obviously, the majority of my close family and obviously close friends are all in Australia. So I always get back as often as I can. So it's 24 hours, a small price to pay to spend time with people. But obviously from a work sense, everything is here in Italy, in Europe, and in this side of the world.
Beautiful. No, very good. Well, in the intro, we obviously mentioned just a few of the channels and the programs that you were on. What I want to ask is essentially how does your day-to-day work? Like obviously being, doing as much as you do, what's your schedule look like?
Yeah, there's no schedule, and that's the hardest part of what I do. That I have zero routine, and that's zero routine with anything. Not only work, it's also sleep, it's food, it's everything. There's no routine, and that's the difficulty of the way that I currently operate, the way that I currently live my life. That while some of the highlights look all well and good, and you're rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest names in the world, and you're at some of the biggest games in the world, there's a lot of that which is certainly the sacrifice, the difficulties, the challenges that you have to overcome on a daily basis. So it's very frustrating because I do like to be quite organized and have myself as organized as possible to be able to plan and just ensure that I'm operating at a high level, but it is very difficult. So yeah, a little similar to a player, you have to perform and be called upon to be at your optimal level with very little time to prepare. Players these days play every 3 days. I find myself covering games every 2-3 days. And while it's very different in terms of its demands, but for me, having no routine and having no really regular sense of what's coming next can be quite difficult, can be quite tiring. So whether it's games in Italy or across the continent in Champions League, Europa League, whatever the case is, whether there are international tournaments, whether there are events with FIFA, UEFA, which I do, or some work with AC Milan, it's always irregular, but certainly at this stage, what I really enjoy. I like the as difficult as it is, I like the fact that it's a little bit unknown what tomorrow holds.
You had mentioned that you currently live in Milan. Was that at the beginning by personal preference, or do you feel like with your line of work, more opportunity was there?
Well, it was all personal choice and just a guess, to be honest. Everything I've done my whole life, my whole journey has always been a guess. No one's rolled out a red carpet for me to arrive to anywhere where I've arrived to. I've always constantly taken risks with the hope of getting something in return. And as I've built up the experience, these risks have become more strategic risks, and opposed to hoping something will happen, it's been with a bit more certainty that I expect something will happen, because I sort of have learned how the industry works. And I do a lot of mentoring in the space, and anyone young and up and coming who wishes to not necessarily follow in the same path, but push the boundaries a little and learn a bit more about the respective industry, I always encourage them to think outside the square. And so for me, I spent a lot of time before moving to Europe and the US, lived in Miami and spent a lot of time in New York. And it was just more so about learning how not only the industry works, but also how the world works, how the business world works, how the networking world works. And over time made strategic guesses and plans and put these strategies into place that I had built up enough experience that when I moved to Milan 5 years ago, I could have and still could pick any city in Europe to live in. But I strategically picked Milan because of my niche of being Italian, of being an Italian speaker, but also an English speaker, of which you may be surprised, but it's very rare here in Italy. English is not a strength of this country. And just felt that my partners and networks and people that I had been working with, I would be of most value if I based myself here in this country. So yeah, still on the, I say every month or so, I think about potentially maybe moving to a different country just to have a new experience. But at this point in time, I've really built my niche in this city, in this country, and have been able to leverage off that and my previous experience to grow in the capacity I have.
Good problem to have, picking which country to live in Europe.
It's not a bad sport. I mean, Beckham forced to move over there when he was still playing how many years ago, so it must be all right.
It's not bad. It's a cool city. Actually, I say I consider moving just because I do love I find beauty in many parts of Europe, but Milan for me is the absolute perfect home. It's a beautiful city. It's a wonderful place to be based for the work I do, and just for the comforts of having family nearby. I've still got a lot of family in Italy, so it's a wonderful part of the country and Europe to be based in.
James touched on a couple of networks that you're currently working with and previously worked with as well. So you've obviously experienced a lot of amazing and some of the biggest footballing moments in the world, coverage over continents everywhere. What's been the most challenging live broadcast you've probably experienced?
Yeah, been very fortunate, very grateful for that. I think in terms of challenging, I think in terms of events or matches or tournaments, whatever the case may be, for me, everything is stressful, but I make, as best I can, nothing stressful. And I just approach everything as if it's a normal conversation. So irrespective of whether I'm hosting in studio, on a pitch, in a big event room, hosting an event to either an intimate or a big group of people, for me, I approach it exactly the same. I speak exactly as I speak to you now, and therefore I don't let the moment get the better of me. However, there are sometimes occasions where things are out of your hands that do add stresses and pressures that otherwise may not have been there. And they're the moments where perhaps you're put to the test a little more than others. And for me, they do come in either long tournaments where it's a 30-day tournament, a European Championships, a World Cup, where you're really put to the test. I talk about sleep and eating being difficult. They're the difficulties that really put you under pressure. You need to maintain an optimal level to ensure the 5-10 minutes you're live on air, pitch side before a big game, that you have found the energy to ensure that you're providing your best performance. But I think it's in some specific moments that I've had challenges whereby I can recall very easily. I've been last season, the Champions League semi-final, Real Madrid, before obviously they went on to the finals, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and it was 85,000 sold out at the Bernabeu, very noisy stadium, very difficult to hear your studio. So I was reporting live on one of my networks, beIN Sports, and we very regularly have Arsene Wenger as a pundit in our studio, and Wenger was a part of the conversation that I was obviously contributing to live. and he indirectly sort of asked me a question, but at this point, the crowd was so loud, the Real Madrid players were coming out, that I could barely hear a word that Wenger was saying. And it's in these moments where you obviously want to respect one of the all-time great figures in the game. You don't have a single idea what he's just said. So you need to be quite tactical and smart in the way that you go about beating around the bush to make it look like you have an idea what he said. So actually, when I got off air that day, look, you can only do the best you can do, but I was a little nervous to think, I hope I didn't absolutely make a meal of that. But my producer wrote to me and said, I could tell you had no idea what was being said, but you pulled it off well. So the viewer will certainly think you were across it. So look, it's those moments like that where you are really put to the test, because it obviously can become quite embarrassing, but they're the challenges and they're the moments that if you maintain just a level of calmness, coolness, you do the best you can, and that's all you can do. So, yeah, you take them all as they come, but they're definitely the most difficult moments in the space, especially when you're live.
When you're speaking to obviously like professionals such as Arsene Wenger, like you mentioned, right? Are there any times where you completely disagree with an opinion and you just want to turn around and say, what are you talking about, man? They put your bill across? Surely there's got to be some times.
That's a funny one because, of course, yes, look, Arsene Wenger is Arsene Wenger, and not that I've ever disagreed with Arsene Wenger, but just like these people at the end of the day, they have their opinions based on their experience. So I think in a case of an individual at that level, I think even if you were to completely disagree with what they say, you just take it on merit that they know more than me, so they can have it. But yes, look, there have certainly been times where I've been live on broadcast, and especially when I'm talking to people, say we're doing a Champions League game, it's an Italian club against an English club or an Italian club against a German club, and perhaps in studio, they're not as clued up on the Italian league as I am, and they may be coming from a different angle. There are times where I've had, look, not disagreements, but there are times where, well, maybe you just have to realign that line of thought because it's actually, that's not the case, this is the case. And you do that respectfully. Yeah. But I think if you're talking about someone at the Wenger level, you let that slide. It's all good.
I like my job.
Yeah, exactly. But look, honestly, for me, yes, I have a wealth of experience in the football space, covering not only Italian football, but most top leagues across Europe. I try and provide a voice to bring the fan closer to the action. So if I'm on the pitch, I am not an ex-footballer. I am not a football expert. So what I try and do, I'm also not a journalist. Yes, I am a journalist by trade, but I'm just a presenter who's there to bring you as the viewer closer to the action. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm not trying to overanalyze tactically and technically the game, because there are pundits in the studio who are there to do that. They've played the game, they've coached the game. What I just try and do is bring that viewer closer to the field, the energy, and bring some energy to my broadcast to make them feel a part of the experience. And so for that reason as well, I often try and steer my conversation and my, let's say, analysis to what the viewer otherwise can't see from their couch at home.
With those big moments, obviously come big individuals, big athletes, and you've interviewed some of the greats. Is there a specific interview that's been impactful for you and memorable for you that you thought, I wouldn't think of even, being around this individual, let alone interviewing this individual?
Yeah. Yeah, look, I don't think there's any... For me, it's more about the context of the conversation as opposed to the quality of the individual. I've been beside Messi, Ronaldo, Neymar, Mbappe. Yes, did I think I would be next to them yesterday and then tomorrow I'm interviewing them? No, not necessarily. But I mean, that's just part of the trade. I have had some fantastic interviews in very sporadic settings with these figures and post-match and at events, and that's all well and good. But for me, I have always respected these individuals, but I don't view I'm not in awe of anyone more so than anyone else. I just admire them as young men and women who are doing incredible things at incredibly high levels. So for me, I've taken great pleasure out of some longer format interviews I've been able to do with certain individuals that I've connected with on a great level, to a point where we're still in contact today. And I don't do my job to become friends with footballers or anything along those lines. But when you do build connections with these guys, they inspire me. They motivate me to continue to push the boundaries with what I do. And so the answer to your question is, and there's two of them that come to mind, and they're both not from Europe. And that's what I've also related to quite well in terms of, moving your life and coming to the other side of the world to pursue your dreams. I was very fortunate. I do a lot of work with some top players, agents and whatnot, and a lot of them gave me some exclusive interviews with their players in the lead up to the 2022 World Cup. And one of them that I did was with Danilo, who current Juventus player, Brazil captain still, I believe, and he's former Man City, Real Madrid. He's played all the top clubs around the world. And I spent a nice hour with Danilo, who I've interviewed on a number of occasions, but not necessarily in this longer, intimate format. And the stories that he was able to share with me about what football means to him, what playing for his country means to him, what representing his people, his friends, his family, his schoolmates, and what putting on the Brazil shirt means to him, just really brought me back to my roots of why I'm so passionate about the game. Now, I never played for my country at a World Cup, but it made me remember why I fell in love and why I'm in love with the sport and what it means to people. And just so special to sit beside someone who's, yes, achieved everything there is to achieve in the game and played at the highest level, but the fact that he still speaks about it as if he's a child dreaming of playing for, and of all countries, Brazil, at World Cups and doing this, it was truly special and truly inspiring to listen to. The other one that I was very fortunate to do, and this was repeated interviews, and he's a wonderful guy, and unfortunately he's left Italy now, but Victor Osimhen, who from Nigeria, played for Napoli, won the Scudetto with Napoli, Napoli's first championship in 33 years, since Diego Maradona, and he's a very humble, very mature young man from Nigeria who went to Naples, obviously via France, came to Naples out of all parts of Italy, and to do what he did, achieve what he did, and have that connection with a fan base like Napoli as he did, just remarkable to be a part of his journey in the capacity that I was able to sit there and speak with him and listen and learn and see how it all unfolded. Was, they're the moments that I remember more so than, standing beside a Messi or a Ronaldo. It's those really intimate conversations that I will, really cherish forever.
It was a little bit of a shame how he was portrayed towards the end of that transfer market and everything that just happened recently.
A mess, an absolute mess. And I feel for him because he's a lovely guy, but I guess his image, he wasn't made to look like the good guy in all of that. And I hope that they're able to repair that because he is a lovely guy, but that was a little bit of miscommunication. The club, the agent massively, the player, it didn't end well, but sadly, with all respect to any Napoli fans listening, Napoli, then it's a club that's not surprising that's happened. Their president is a good operator, but he's crazy. The club have made some rash decisions in the past, and it happens. Look, it happens. But what he did, no one can ever take that away from him, and it was so special to be a part of that in a small capacity.
You mentioned obviously speaking to people who are quite inspirational. I mean, to be fair, even speaking to yourself, I mean, you've got the potential to inspire a lot of young people yourself, right? Because, you might not have been playing the game at the highest level, but however, you're still doing such huge work within the game. Was there like a flick of a switch moment when you were younger? Like taking back obviously when you were younger, like there's a lot of kids growing up, they want to play football, they can't make it, they're stuck, they don't know what to do. Was there a flick of a switch moment when you've gone, I'm going to go down this road of television, or was it always, look, I'm going to try and be the best I can be as a reporter or a presenter?
First, that's very kind of you, James. I appreciate that a lot. And it's something I'm actually passionate about doing. I love to help people. I take such joy from being able to help people. I take more joy from that than anything else. So, that's why I do mentor and I do like to do that, because I remember the very, very few people who helped me in my journey, more than not, didn't help me. And I remember that. I don't hold that against anyone, but I remember that many didn't. But the few that did, I remember how special and how much that meant to me. So it's always very important to repay that faith shown in me from others, and I'm happy to pass that on. In terms of a moment, no, I mentioned earlier, Aussie Rules was what I played, and I suppose the game was very different back then. I'm on the smaller side in the game, but was good, was probably not the time for me to pursue that professionally. So my love for sport was always playing sport, but I also had this love for television. And from the age of 10, 11, I always knew I wanted to work in the TV space. And my passion, despite my interest in playing Aussie rules, was in football. My interests, I knew where my interests were from the age of birth. Well, from the days of birth, like my family all immigrated from Italy. And for me, the Italian national team and watching that from a very, very young age, all my childhood memories were around that. So it was the one thing that I did. It was the one thing I used to do with my relatives, particularly my grandfather, who loved the game and really instilled that love and passion for me in the game. So did I think it would become a reality? Probably not at the age of 10, but I used to wake up at 4 a.m. to watch, Milan and Inter play at San Siro, Roma and Lazio play at the Olimpico. To fast forward, years on, and the fact that I'm actually there on the regular pitch side, yes, I've always been focused on what I wanted to achieve, but sometimes I do reflect on that's crazy how that's actually happened. And even if I stop today, I've done it. Like there's not too much else I actually set out to do. I've actually done it. So the moment that it set with me that I wanted to do it, it was always in my subconscious mind that this is what I'm going to make happen. And again, I said off the top, there's no blueprint. In Australia, what I always encourage people to do, especially younger people coming through, is not to disregard the advice of others, but don't be afraid to do something different to everyone else. And I love where I come from. I love Australia. I love my city, Melbourne. But I find at times we can be a little opposed to ambitious thinking in Australia. And I don't like that because that's not how I am. It's not an arrogance. It's not overconfidence. It's being bold and it's having big dreams and reaching for the stars. And if you fall short, no stress. But perhaps you go further than you otherwise would have if you set more modest goals. And that is always my advice to everyone. I've been very fortunate to travel the world covering the game I love. I've been very fortunate to live across multiple continents, multiple countries. And what I see in other parts of the world is bold, ambitious thinking that's not shot down, but that's encouraged and supported. And so I just encourage always people to do that. So when I found my calling that, yes, this is what I want to do, I just felt more so that I would have more chance of growth away from Australia. And this is why I did that from a very, very young age. First time I left Australia was 20. I had graduated university and I went to London. I was accepted in a range of internships in London. And that was just my way of just throwing myself in the deep end, in the big world, in the real world, and learning and seeing and doing. And yeah, I've grown so much since then, but it's as a result of just thinking outside the square and unrelentlessly chasing my dreams and ambitions.
It's going to be my next question. Obviously, you mentioned thinking outside the box, but if there was obviously a bit of advice you'd want to reach out to the kids of today to try and help them, but obviously you spoke about it there. But I'll change my question to essentially, do you think maybe the ambition there for Australians isn't there because we are so disconnected from the rest of the world? I mean, you look at Europe, it's a melting pot of different cultures and food and people and whatnot, and people are taking not ideas from other countries, but seeing what they're doing and trying to improve on that as well. Yeah. Do you think potentially that could be a reason why that big jump all the way across is too far? Maybe it's just best to play it safe because we live in such a beautiful, safe, wealthy country here. Maybe just play the safe option and stay here.
Yeah, definitely. And that's not limited to football. I'm talking culturally in general here as well, because it's the beautiful thing of Australia is that everything you've identified is correct. We have world-class lifestyle, world-class living, world-class beaches, world-class everything. We have diversity. We have multiculturalism. It is a melting pot of beauty. There is so much beauty there. We are so isolated from the world. And with that, the reason why Australia is just a big, beautiful bubble, which is so nice, it's safe and secure. But if you are of a mindset where you want to be influenced by other things, other parts of the world, it's not there on your doorstep. Here in Milan, there are 4 countries that border the north of Italy, 4 countries. So even if I'm not seeking influence from outside of Italy, it comes to me. So you are more exposed to the world around you. Whereas in Australia, we are exposed to the world around us via what we see on TV or online and what we consume. You are not really influenced. I love my city, Melbourne, but every time I go back, I feel more and more that it is isolated from the rest of Australia, let alone the rest of the world. And it's that whereby, and it's not, and just to be clear, it's not only about going overseas. It's not about that, because firstly, not everyone can. No, that's not for everyone. But secondly, that's not the only outcome here. It's about the mindset. When you see there's other way to do things, you think there are other ways to do things. However, if you only know one way to do things, then you are not going to have the tools to make a decision to do something in another way, which may be more beneficial for you. Perhaps that lifestyle there works for everyone, but it's the fact of just thinking outside the square, not meaning making rash decisions, but just thinking in a different manner that may open up ideas and possibilities that were otherwise not there. And I think when you do that, you will start to also value more about the beauty of our country, because Australia is so beautiful and we do have the safety and security net that so much of the world do not have. And I always encourage people who want to think outside the square, you would be silly if you don't take a massive risk knowing that beautiful Australia is your fallback. Every risk I've ever taken, I've taken that risk because I know that if all else fails, I have a great life experience, and tomorrow I go back to my family in my beautiful city. I cannot lose. And with that mentality, you should feel that you can take on the world. Take on the world, try, fail, maybe succeed, but who cares, because we've got Australia as our fallback. You must be blessed for that and maintain that perspective.
Yeah, love that.
It's such a good perspective. That's wild when you think about it. Yeah, James sort of only touched on sort of football, but if you jump into cultures and everything you just mentioned,
Culturally,
blows your mind. So I wanted to ask, say you take your life as a sports presenter and you play it as it's narrated as a football match. If you can, give me a highlight reel and also a red card moment.
Oh, well-articulated question. Give me red card moment. That's
something that maybe could have went south, potential viral moment that in studio, anything like that could have potentially happened.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll start there as we're discussing it. There are a couple of things that come to mind, but I guess as every day as social media continues to evolve, the chance of an error becoming a more viral moment enhances significantly. So, look, I guess if I did stuff up that chat with Wenger at the Bernabeu, then that could have been something that didn't go so well. No, a couple of funny ones that did happen. Again, I was fortunate to avoid any disaster, but one in studio, one out in the field, but one in studio when I was working at beIN Sports, living in Qatar years back. You know, if you're reading like a news broadcast, we had like a regular daily news show, the auto cues ticking over. One day, as it happens from time to time, it completely stopped on me. And coincidentally, I was talking about a Wenger story. He was coach of Arsenal at the time. They were playing Chelsea. And you've got your papers in front of you. So if worse comes to worse, you can read them. And somehow it stopped on me, and I still had like a few paragraphs to read before it went into vision. And if you freeze in that moment, like I've seen it happen with newsreaders in Australia, anywhere around the world, it can become, you can physically see the anchor like sweat. And so but somehow I had the right paper in front of me, so I was able to read through it. And then I bluffed my way through the actual visuals, and I went to a break. So I narrowly avoided a red card moment there. The other one, which is it's not embarrassing because it was live and happening in the moment, but it was here in Milan 5 years ago. It was the FIFA Best Award, so FIFA's World Player of the Year Awards. And Messi won the award, and we knew this before the event took place. So it was Messi, Van Dijk, and Ronaldo, the top three players. And we knew Messi was going to win, so in the lead-up, I was on the green carpet, like hosting this show, and it was live. And Messi arrived, and they said, just make sure you get a word from Messi before he goes in, because I was working with FIFA officially, so then we can use it when he wins in a package afterwards. So Messi was walking towards us, and my co-anchor she speaks, she was like speaking Spanish. She's Argentine Spanish and speaking that. And basically, she went to say to him, like, join us. And his wife said, no, we have to go. And I didn't hear that because I wasn't listening to the Spanish. And so I went to, like, shake Messi's hand. and he didn't look at me at all and like just walked past. So I was stuck on like a green carpet with my hand like empty from Messi, which was a bit embarrassing. I didn't even do that one.
If there's going to be anyone that's going to miss you, that's all right. That's all right.
Exactly.
That's a bit embarrassing, but I guess you can say that happened to you. You got fresh air from Messi, so that was
Yeah.
cool.
That's anybody else's highlight. That'd be a highlight for anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of a highlight reel, so give me some more context in terms of the match being played out.
Yeah, say anything. Say that you got coverage and you were attending, say it was World Cup final, the Euro final, just, a surreal moment like that.
Yeah. Look, I guess if I have to play out my highlights chronologically, say opening minutes for me, getting my first break. Like, I never worked in Australia. This is the crazy thing. No one ever gave me a job in Australia to work in TV, ever. They used to say to me, you're early 20s, you're young, you're hungry, you've got some internships. I did internships with ESPN, Sky Sports in the UK. You've got the hunger, you're good with what you do considering you don't have experience, but come back when you get experience. And I say to these guys, but if you don't give me experience, where do I get experience? Straight out. And this is where I started to think, okay, maybe abroad is my go. So I guess my highlights chronologically in game format, early minutes, an opportunity to work for beIN Sports, a new international broadcaster, just opened the hub in Miami, get the opportunity there. Within the blink of an eye, they send me to Qatar. And then all of a sudden I'm going from South Beach, Miami to Doha, Qatar, the complete opposite ends of the world, complete opposite lifestyles. But suddenly I'm working internationally in TV broadcast. And how did that happen? And I'm completely learning on the job. And that was fantastic. So the early minutes of that, fast forward a couple of years, and I've got some years under my belt. I've now spent time in Miami, Qatar, significant time in Qatar. I've spent a lot of time in New York, in the US, and I've put together a portfolio of work now that I didn't have previously. So much so that then I start getting opportunities from other international broadcasters to appear here, appear there, be on the ground here. And slowly but surely, I built up this catalog of work that then, you asked me earlier, why Milan? How did I move there? Well, I had this portfolio of work. It was now, if I strategically, after all of these years, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of working in journalism, in radio, in TV, if I can now base myself there, leverage off near a decade of work, this is where I think I can really take off. And that's what I did. I moved myself to Milan now 5 years ago, and I was able to, the first job I got in Milan was hosting this FIFA green carpet show. FIFA contacted me the day I arrived in Milan. It was crazy. And then 2 weeks later, I'm on this green carpet with Messi winning the FIFA Best World Player of the Year award. And it just snowballed from there. It was then a case of I had a partner in Africa, I had a partner in Asia, I had the networks in Australia, I was on the ground. COVID came, it really threw everything up in the air. And in the last 5 years, it's gone so quickly that now I've done 4 or 5 major international tournaments, men's World Cups, women's World Cups, multiple European championships. I've done the last 6 Champions League finals. I've seen Italy win the Euros at Wembley, which is a moment that will never, ever be topped. Like these things which I could only have ever dreamt of, now I've just suddenly done. But it was as a result of all that unrewarded work, sacrifice, travel, that got me to a point where all of a sudden they came about because I strategically placed myself in the right place at the right time. So the highlights of being alongside Messi and Ronaldo, the highlights of sitting down with top players to understand the context and really the narrative and their story behind how they got to where they got to, hosting major FIFA events, hosting UEFA season launch draws and World Cup draws for FIFA, things that I'd always dreamt of doing, but suddenly as a result of all the work that I put into it, I'm now able to do it and be considered for these roles. It feels like it's happened a bit in the blink of an eye, but really it's been, 15 years of ongoing hard work and sacrifice. It's a never-ending journey.
Amazing.
That's unreal.
That's a good highlight reel.
And I was fresh aired by Messi as well. Yes.
Exactly. Now, obviously, when it comes around, we have to ask, when it comes around to transfer window time, there's one name, especially from Italy, always pops up. It's Fabrizio Romano. Do you do much to do? Like, have you worked with him at all? But the back end of that question I want to ask is: have you got your own "Here we go" catchphrase? Because there was a big trend over the European summer that all these people were throwing out their own catchphrases all over the socials.
Yes.
So there's two parts to that question there. Have you done much work with him, and have you got your own catchphrase?
I don't have my own catchphrase. Maybe we can work on one by the end of this show. But no, look, big admirer of his work. I do know Fabrizio. He's here in Milan as well. You know, young guy doing great things. Do our work crossover? Not particularly. I guess I use him as a source for when I need to provide context of what's happening here in Italy. But look, he's again young guy who's been able to really build a very well, not only build his brand and his niche, but really change the game, change the landscape of modern day journalism. And he comes from a world where he's built it himself. And again, people see what he's doing, and now he's collaborating with great partners and involved with great brands. But that is relentless work, non-stop work, sacrifice with no reward in the early stages for a long time. And so that's why I really admire and respect what he's been able to build and what he's continuing to build, because that's what it takes. And that's the mentality of what I'm saying earlier, of what it takes to push the boundaries and, believe in the unbelievable. And what he's doing is quite remarkable, because it has completely changed football coverage and journalism in that regard, not only in Italy, but right across the continent. So amazing stuff. We're going to have to get that catchphrase though, because I did see the trend. It was funny because even some of the top clubs were like announcing new players with some of the new catchphrases, which was quite cool.
Absolutely. We'll have to get our brains together and come up with something. We'll come up with something. Sure. Now, the second biggest question of the interview I have to ask: Australia versus Italy, World Cup, knockout phase, so you can't say draw. Who are you supporting?
Well, it happened in 2006, right? I remember it very well.
Correct.
And yeah, look, I can give you my very easy, you're football people, so you understand, but I can give you my very easy response to it, because for me, as I said earlier, I grew up, and the one thing I knew before anything was Italy, is Italian football, blue shirt, azzurri. From my early years, this was the one thing that I always watched, consumed, and enjoyed with my entire family. So for me, it wasn't even about it being a country. It was about the fact that this is Italy. This is the thing that we do together. That blue shirt, we all come together. My nonna's cooking at 2 a.m. We're watching, we're having fun. So the answer is Italy. The only thing I'm a fan of in sport is the Italian national team. I've lost all fandom for football. I'm just not a fan anymore. Yes, I love the Italian clubs, but the Italian national team brings me back to the days of my birth. And with respect to sports fans in Australia, this isn't a sport. This is different. Football is very different. And so for me, my heart is always with Italy. But obviously, I support Australia, but it's a different support. And if the two play each other, Italy's the thing that I've been in love with. So as a natural sports fan, that's where I am. I know it was very contentious, very controversial back then, but for me, I view them as two different things. One is the country, one is the pride of the country, which is Australia. One is the team that you support, which is Italy. So it's a very confusing one, but that's just how it is. And you can't, I certainly can't manufacture the passion I've had for Italy since the day of my birth. And given my work in this space, I don't actually support anything anymore, and that's all I've got. So let me have that, and then I can.
See, I've got a bit of a different mentality, because when I was 18, I went over to Greece to go play, and I lived there for over a year. I was playing over there, and people would ask me, you'd be eligible to play for both Greece and Australia.
Of course.
Prior to going there, play for Greece, Euro Cup over Asia Cup, of course, whatnot.
Yeah.
But what changed my mind is the fact that meeting so many people when I was living there who grew up in Greece. I grew up in Australia. I understand Australia like the back of my hand. I'm an Aussie. Compared to the kids that grow up in Greece and live and breathe Greece, I would never be them. And when I left and I came back home, I thought if I had to choose between one, I would have to play. I'd 100% pick Australia, because this is my home. I grew up here.
Fair,
Just like their home is there, and I can never say I'm any more Greek than what they are. So
fair. But in the present day, like if we look at two young Italian Australians who are playing here in Italy right now, Chidkati plays for Parma. He just picked Australia. The kid was born in Italy, and he picked Australia because he grew up in Perth. And I know him very well. And then the other one, Volpato, he's from New South Wales. He's picked Italy, but he was born in Australia. So I absolutely respect your experience, but I think the response to that is that no one can tell someone else how to feel or how to think, because
Correct.
everyone's experience is completely different. And what I didn't like in 2006 is that particularly Australians who are new to the sport, don't understand the cultural side of the sport, were saying to other people, to Italians, you should support this for these reasons. Well, with respect, again, the sport's it's not AFL, it's not NRL, it's completely different. And if you've invested that time into this sport, national sports and in Australia, we don't, yes, okay, maybe our rugby team and the cricket number one, the patriotism that comes with that is different to supporting clubs. It's very different. And in football, supporting your national team, everyone's experience is completely unique, completely different. So you prefer Australia over Greece, you prefer Australia over Italy, Italy over Australia, Greece over Australia. Everyone's entitled to their own thing. And that's why I've always found the debate over these two kids, Volpato and Chidkati, fascinating from Australians back in Australia, because they don't know their makeup, their upbringing, their childhood, their anything. So it's but it's an interesting debate, no doubt about it.
Don't get me
but
wrong.
Look,
when Greece is playing Australia, I was going to say when Greece is playing Australia, I'm wearing a half and half jersey, so I can't lose.
No, exactly. But that's it. At the end of the day, it's tough. But you know what? It's also what makes Australia so beautiful, because the multiculturalism, it's so unique in that way, and bringing cultures all together to form one Australia is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. But for me personally, Italy was like a team from childhood, and this team meant that it was beyond the country. It was a team that brought my family together, and it was experiences that I haven't replicated with anything else ever in my life, and that's why it's a different level of something that, Australia was new to the scene when they came in 2006, and I hadn't had those same experiences. So different love.
Well, Adriano, this has been an amazing conversation, but we do like to finish the podcast off before we wrap it up with a bang. We've got our infamous question, and all the viewers know it. It's the coach's son nomination. So, Adriano, who is your coach's son?
Coach's son. So, again, we discussed on the top, but you need someone here who's been a figure that I've dealt with in my life who
it could be anyone that you've dealt with, that you've worked with, that you've interviewed, someone who's a bit of a teacher's pet, who's a bit of mucks around a bit too. Someone that stands out.
I've been thinking subconsciously throughout the whole show, right? Yeah. And for me, the one that comes to mind, because I've had a lot to do with him, and I've shared this story before on other podcasts, but also just as a character and what he was able to achieve in the game. I work for AC Milan as one of my clients, and now he's a director at the club, and he's a former player, and he's a legend of the game. And for me, it has to be Zlatan Ibrahimovic, because he's a character who I've dealt with, who is unlike any other character I've dealt with in any aspect of my life ever. And it's a guy who I admire so much, because he's been at the top of the top of the top of the world game. But everything he does, he keeps it real. And he brings it back down to a human level. And he doesn't make you feel inadequate. He doesn't make you feel any lesser. But he's just his same self. And I've always looked at him, whether working together or just indirectly, whatever the case is, as someone that if he can be like that and he can maintain his true self at all times, then I can do that, and I should always do that, and I should always be true to myself, and everyone else should do that. And so for me, I know a lot about his story. I know a lot about where he's been, what he's done, and he may have been controversial throughout the journey, but he's someone who I think really sets a standard for how to handle oneself. And again, maybe he's not everyone's cup of tea in terms of how outspoken and the character he is, but I just like the fact that he is who he is, and he sticks by that, and he's very strong in ensuring that he sticks by that. And that level of self-respect and not pandering to anyone else. I think there's a lot of strength and yeah, therefore have a great deal of respect for he. And I've been able to share some really funny moments with he over the journey. I've shared this one before, but he was minutes away from winning the championship with Milan. He had gone to America and then came back and played for AC Milan, and they were minutes away from winning the championship. He just come back from a knee reconstruction, and he was on the bench sort of like stretching over the top of me and about to come onto the pitch. And I like slapped him on the back and said, make sure you score, something like that. And I did that. And in that moment, he's about to go on for the last game of the season. And he shared with me some words in Italian and then said to me in English, you know how lucky you are. Not everyone gets to touch God like at a moment like this. And that's amazing. That's amazing. There's no cameras there. There's no one watching that. He doesn't know who's listening. And I just love that. That's a guy who, that's his way. That's the way he rolls. And I just respect that a lot. If he can do it, I can do it. And that's it. So he's my coach's son.
There you go. James, I don't think we're going to be able to top that one.
Well, I don't think we ever will. But I think I think we may have come with your catchphrase. That's going to be inspired by Zlatan, because obviously he's got the infamous line that Zlatan doesn't do auditions. And if you're reporting on something that's factual, you could just sign off with not an audition.
Not an audition. I like it. I like it. I might need to slip that in my next whatever I do.
Hey, 100%. If you do, let us know, because I'll be sharing it everywhere.
That's amazing. Not an audition.
Unbelievable. Well, Adriano, thank you very much for your time. It was a great conversation, and I think everyone's really going to love this chat.
Much appreciated, guys. Anytime.
Thank you. And to everyone out there, make sure you like and subscribe, and tune in next week. Thanks very much, everyone.
This was not meant